It was the summer of my junior year in college when I decided to travel alone to the United States. The thought of new adventures and experiences excited me, and I looked forward to exploring a different culture and making new friends. I rented a small apartment in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It wasn't luxurious, but it was cozy and, more importantly, affordable. My friend Claire was the only person I knew in the city. She lived a few blocks away, and we would often meet up for coffee or to explore the city together. One night, after a long day of sightseeing, I returned to my apartment exhausted. I took a quick shower and settled into bed, looking forward to a good night's sleep. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, a loud bang jolted me awake. My heart raced as I sat up in bed, straining to hear any other sounds. The bang was followed by what sounded like a muffled scream. My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. I crept out of bed and cautiously peered out of my window. The street was dimly lit by the occasional street lamp, casting long, eerie shadows. I saw a figure darting away from one of the neighboring houses. The shadow moved quickly, disappearing into the darkness. I quickly locked my windows and doors, my mind buzzing with fear and confusion. I told myself it was just a random act of vandalism, nothing more. But the unease lingered as I climbed back into bed. The next morning, I tried to shake off the previous night's events as I prepared breakfast. I had almost managed to convince myself that it was just my imagination when there was a knock on the door. I hesitated before opening it to find a policeman standing there. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, his tone serious but polite. "Did you hear or see anything unusual last night?" A wave of fear washed over me. Not wanting to get involved, I lied. "No, officer, I didn't hear anything." He nodded, thanked me for my time, and moved on to the next apartment. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. What had really happened last night? That evening, I turned on the news, hoping to find out more about the previous night's events. What I saw made my blood run cold. A woman had been unalived in her home, just a few houses down from mine. The report mentioned that the suspect had been arrested, but the most chilling part was that he had been impersonating a policeman, going door to door, interrogating the residents. My mind raced back to the morning's encounter. The man who had knocked on my door, the one I had assumed was a real policeman, had actually been the suspect. I felt a wave of nausea as I realized how close I had come to danger. The following days were a blur of fear and paranoia. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and every small noise sent me into a state of panic. I decided to call Claire and confide in her. She listened patiently, her voice soothing me as she tried to calm my nerves. "You need to report this to the police," she said firmly. "You might have information that could help with the investigation." I reluctantly agreed, and the next day I went to the police station. The officers were understanding and took my statement. They assured me that they were doing everything they could to ensure the safety of the neighborhood. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. I tried to focus on my studies and put the incident behind me. One night, I received a call from Claire. Her voice was trembling, and I could barely make out her words. "Claire, what's wrong?" I asked, my own fear rising. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice shaking. "I was talking to one of the neighbors, and they said the man who was arrested wasn't the real killer. The real killer is still out there, and he's been seen around the neighborhood." My blood ran cold. The man I had seen that night, the one who had come to my door, was still out there. I felt a wave of panic and fear wash over me. I thanked Claire for the information and hung up, my mind racing. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I installed additional locks on my doors and windows and bought a security camera system. I even started taking self-defense classes. But the fear never really left me, and every time I heard a noise at night, I would jump, expecting the worst. One night, as I was reviewing the footage from the security cameras, I saw something that made my heart stop. There, on the screen, was the shadowy figure standing in my yard, staring up at my window. I watched in horror as he moved closer to the house, disappearing from the camera's view. I ran to the window and looked out, but there was no one there. I called the police, my hands shaking as I explained what I had seen. They arrived within minutes and searched the area, but found no trace of anyone. The police advised me to stay with a friend or family member for a few days while they increased patrols in the area. I called Claire, who immediately offered to let me stay with her. I packed a bag and left my apartment, hoping the increased police presence would catch the stalker. While staying with Claire, I tried to piece together everything that had happened. Why was this man targeting me? What did he want? I started doing some research and found out that the previous tenant of my apartment had also reported strange occurrences, shadows, noises, and the feeling of being watched. It seemed like this wasn't a new phenomenon. I decided to go back to my apartment to gather more of my belongings. Claire offered to come with me for support. As we entered the apartment, everything seemed normal. I started packing, and Claire helped, trying to keep the mood light with small talk. Suddenly, Claire froze, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I listened and heard a faint scratching sound coming from the other room. My heart pounded as I slowly walked towards the noise. I opened the door to my bedroom and saw a figure crouched by the window, trying to pry it open. I screamed and the figure turned to face me. It was the man from the security footage. His eyes were wild, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He lunged at me, and I barely managed to dodge him. Claire grabbed a lamp and swung it at him, hitting him on the head. The man stumbled, dazed, and I took the opportunity to run out of the apartment, pulling Claire with me. We ran down the stairs and out into the street, screaming for help. The police arrived quickly and arrested the man. As they took him away, he kept muttering about shadows and voices, his eyes darting around wildly. The police later informed us that the man had a history of mental illness and had been stalking various residents in the neighborhood for years. He had become fixated on me after seeing me through the window one night. I moved out of the apartment the next day, unable to stay in a place that now held such terrifying memories. I found a new place in a different part of the city, and slowly life began to return to normal. But the fear never truly left me. Even now, years later, I still check my windows and doors every night, making sure they're locked. I never found out what the man meant by shadows and voices, but sometimes in the dead of night, I think I hear faint whispers outside my window and I remember the terror of those nights. I've learned to trust my instincts and never ignore the signs, no matter how small they may seem.